Welcome to This Month in Cyber for February 2021. We do have a relatively full agenda, although just a few topics to discuss, just security events that have occurred throughout the month that I think you should probably be knowledgeable about. More importantly, how do you protect yourself? What should a typical organization be doing and be mindful of as we're kind of evolving our security practices over time here. So we're going to talk about a story out of Florida, where almost 1 million people had water issues. And we're going to talk about ransomware pretty specifically. I want to kind of deep dive in on that topic this month and just do everything from, who, what, where, when, why, dose of prevention, and then what to do should it occur to you, as we have it occurring with several organizations we're aware of, what's end of support this month and so forth. So let's start in Florida. A lot of people think of water or don't think of water, right? You turn on the faucet and it goes. It's similar to electricity. It's just one of those utilities you really don't think about much. Obviously, in Texas, this past few weeks, they've been thinking about it quite a lot. The lack of water and having access to water is a humanitarian crisis. So imagine, that water was impacted. And in fact, an alert came out from our CISA, Department of Homeland Security, right? A water treatment facility in Florida, if you had not heard, that serves about 1 million residents. Someone had hacked in. They're not stating or speculating at this point who, but had gotten into their supervisory control and data acquisition, or SCADA, system. Now, every water filtration plant in the United States have a SCADA system. Hopefully for your county, they're not running it on a Windows 7 device and have Windows 7 devices within their organization. Hopefully for you, they're not using TeamViewer, which was a likely access point, or have RDP ports that are open to the outside. And hopefully you're not using poor passwords, right? All three of those are believed to be vectors and approaches that were used to hack into a water filtration system and increase the amount of lye, or sodium hydroxide, which is a caustic chemical at the levels that it was inserted in. Fortunately, a knowledgeable employee, and this might be more analogous to an aware employee within a cybersecurity world, is able to notice some events that don't, or in this case, it just doesn't smell right, and therefore was able to stop the event before it had impacted anyone downstream, literally. But all of those, tend to be issues that surface there. Just standard stuff, right? Out of support software or operating system in this case. An access point in this case was probably TeamViewer, but equally could be RDP, and poor password management. Not leveraging MFA, not having easy to guess passwords that would be either guessable with a dictionary or phishable as it had been happened before. So, be careful of Windows Server 2008 and Windows 7 within your environment. Certainly from an authentication standpoint, be looking at strong passwords, MFA, audit logs. So read more about that story if you have some interest. I'm going to move through some of these stories with some pace, as we do have a fair amount of content this month. End of life browsers, probably worthy to know that Flash, I think we discussed that last month, and maybe even quick mention in December, went end of life at the end of the year. No Flash will be played by any browser, but what that meant is Flash still stayed resident on most machines, even though Microsoft and Flash had agreed to something called a time bomb, meaning after January 12th, no Flash content could be played in that Flash player. But indeed, it still left a bunch of resident code on there, Flash code, that had been subject to, throughout the years, being compromised. Right? They had had a number of vulnerabilities each month for the last 3-4 years. So depending on your Flash versions that were there, it was probably logical to remove this software, and that would probably be, you can go hunting for that. But one of the things Microsoft is doing is this month, they're forcibly removing it as one of the Office updates, should you be interested. And the KBI number on that is 457-7586. Other end-of-life browsers. So if you have any people within your organization using the Edge browser, the legacy Edge browser is going bye-bye, and the new Chromium-based Edge browser is coming online. So Microsoft Edge is legacy is going end-of-life on March 9th. And again, the Chromium Edge will be taking over from there. So we recommend you obviously get a transition plan, verify that that browser is working in your environment. This timeline might help you here. I thought it was a decent graphic, so I included it in there. Talks about the Edge browsers, but additionally, if you look over to the right, you'll notice on August 17th, our infamous IE11 browser, which many people, it's been installed by default for a long time, but that browser, while no longer supporting Teams as of last year, will no longer support Office 365 starting in August. So for those users that might still be using it, probably worthwhile to take a peek under the hood, look across your inventory of desktops and laptops, and verify who might still be in use of those. And more broadly, I would say, oh, and by the way, on April 13th, Windows 10 is going to get an update to allow you to get rid of that IE11, or at least start evaluating what it's like to run without IE11 to see if there's impact. So look for your April updates for more information on that. And certainly you can check out the article I referenced. More broadly, end of support is a challenge, right? There are constantly, especially in this faster software development cycles that we have, both with Microsoft and other vendors, people want the latest and greatest now, and as such, the product support life cycles are falling off the conveyor belt, I'll call it, faster. A few that we point out on our website, which is referenced there, we keep and maintain an end of support timeline for various products that we think our customers might be leveraging. Citrix XenApp just fell off. XenApp 7.6, for anyone running that, it just fell off on January 11th. Windows 10 versions 1903 and earlier, 1803 and 1809 are going to fall off in May. 1803 and 1809, those just came out, in 2018, so they're not that old, and those will be falling off support in May. So Office 2013 and Exchange 2013 won't be falling off for a while, but they're going to lose their access and capability to support Office 365. So might want to look into those if those are still in your environment. The HPE on the hardware side, the DL380 Gen 8 is an example of something coming up. VMware ESX version 6.5 is coming up in November of this year, so time to start planning. And then last but not least is Skype for business on-prem servers. Those will be going off later on this year too. So a fair amount falling off. Again, not everything will impact you, but if I said anything that is resonant with something that's on in your network environment, pay heed. In February this year, we also saw just the last couple days article, February 22nd, in fact, that was just yesterday, but this was articles about 30,000 Macs worldwide, so not a big number, but have been infected with a mysterious malware. This malware is called Silver Sparrow. It doesn't really exhibit any dangerous behaviors at this point, the malware. It's almost like exploratory. A lot of times malware providers are testing the limits, testing their distribution systems. So Silver Sparrow is probably an indication that down the road, if they're able to take advantage of this exploit and test their distribution methods, they can do something more later. It has a self-destruct, meaning destroy the machine capability. It doesn't appear what can or what will trigger that. So early information on that, but pay heed to that if certainly you have Macs within your environment. I'd be remiss, I think I just added this one in kind of last minute, just to remind ourselves that we are still under an unfolding event of SolarWinds. Hopefully you're aware of the fact that SolarWinds Orion products, which were installed on a lot of key areas within the US government, a lot of large organizations. The Orion product had some code injected right into their code development process and into their agent, and then installed out there. And then from there, that was kind of an entry point, and additional malware payloads were created to take advantage of several key organizations, Microsoft, Cisco, the US government, Treasury Department. We had FireEye, which was a security tool vendor, and they ultimately were the ones that kind of discovered some of the strange behaviors between they and Microsoft that unfolded all these events back in December. But this is a yet unfolding event. I'm not going to belabor on it as we did last month. You could certainly look at the recording. I would just simply point out that this is unfolding, and the indications from that event is you really need to pay attention, and strong attention, to what's going on to your Office 365 environment. There's a lot of indications of compromise, especially around identity. Foreign mailbox logins are almost certainly part of an output, if you will, of the SolarWinds breach. And to that end, if you're not looking at your logins on a daily basis and looking for people, let's say, not homed, if you're homed in here in the United States, why would anyone from Nigeria be logging in your Office 365 tenant? That's something you should be scrutinizing daily. And if you're not doing it, we certainly have a process for not only looking at that, but as was kind of indicated back on this slide right here, the Department of Homeland Security came up with a tool called, what was it, Sparrow? Yeah, I think it was Sparrow, not to be confused with the Macintosh one. And these goals are to look at 12 indications of compromise within your Office 365 environment. And so in addition to the normal ones we look at, which are indicated there, we've actually included in our security review for Office 365 some of the Sparrow findings, and we'll surface this up to a console that we see and you see, and we're chartered to either take action on it, or certainly when things are no longer green and have moved to yellow or red, we work with you to basically determine, hey, you may be having a problem here, either with this account or in this area of your Office 365 tenant. So be mindful of that. I think that's going to be unfolding here, obviously starting in December, and we'll see, at least for a year, is my guess. I'm going to spend the balance of our time, and I think we still have 15 minutes left, on ransomware. Ransomware is a large topic. It's probably 1, 2, or 3 in terms of things we discuss on a monthly basis. It's something we see quite often with our customers, or people we maybe not have heard from in a while, that suddenly are knocking on our door saying, can you help me? It looks like some things are going awry within our environment. And obviously by then prevention's too late, and now we're in response mode. But we've put together a guide. This guide is not new by any means. We first produced it, I think, 5 years ago, refreshed it, 6 or 9 months ago. We could refresh it each week, but I think in general, it's got some good guidance if you really want to kind of get your handles around ransomware. And I thought we'd just digest ransomware as a topic. Who does it impact? Who's behind all this, all of that stuff. And let's just kind of run through some figures and facts, just so we're all educated about ransomware and what we can and should be doing around that threat vector. So a lot of the information I get here is referenced in that article, Info Risk Today. I just kind of trying to break it down for you a little bit. Let's talk about who. So first of all, it's important you know that ransomware is done by families. It is a family business, and that doesn't mean the family is genetically related by any means. These are gangs, families. There's coordinated efforts. You look at them as dark market organizations, right? They are fully structured. They have call centers. They have people that work for them, and specifically, they have a hierarchy. There are the owners, okay? There are developers, and these are the people that are actually writing the code. See, the owners are the beneficiaries up at the top. Think of them as like it very well could be organized crime. It could be a government. It could be a shadow organization, but they literally have a cycle where they come in, they work for a while, they retire. Okay, their stuff might go on, and they might pass over the keys, but the owners operate like CEOs. There are developers that create the code. There are operators that push and promulgate the that which has been developed, this good code, if you will. They might run call centers. They run leaking sites for your data because ransomware, we'll discuss, is more than certainly locking up your computers. And then last but not least, there's affiliates, right? Ransomware as a service. They're the lowest levels on the food chain, but they are great at breaking into organizations. In fact, they know entry points into 300 organizations, let's say, and therefore they can take this and go deliver it and get some money and extract dollars out of the 300 organizations by which they're aware of some entry points. So affiliates are an important part, and probably the part that we're dealing with the most when we're facing a ransomware incident within our own organization. We had a ransomware gang that retired last year. Some new operators took over their service, if you will. It kind of, we'll take over your business for you. And so 84% of the attacks last year were done with these 6 families. So very high, near majority. Now there's I think 12, 15 families as a whole, but in general, these 6 were the primary families or gangs that provided attacks to organizations. Okay. As to who's operating and who's doing what, it actually changes by quarter, right? Sometimes I don't know. Developers don't believe you have good code and they leave your family, or your owners decide to retire. I think last year activity decreased from Sodinokibi. You'll see that over in the upper right-hand corner there. Sodinokibi, which is also called Evil or Maze. They announced they're going to be ceasing operations, so they stopped. But don't worry, Egregor, the one down there in the middle, appears to have taken over their mantle and picked up all of its affiliates. So the gang continues, just off with new players. Who's getting attacked? For the most part, this is a U.S. problem. 66% of known ransomware is affecting U.S. companies, 23% in Europe, and 3% in Asia. So U.S. is bearing the brunt of the ransomware output. Last year, there were 621 government entities and 491, or call it 500, healthcare organizations that publicly announced ransomware. Okay. Now, about 20% of people publicly announced. So, just doing the numbers, that's 2,500 healthcare orgs. By the way, one of those organizations I recall was United Care Service, UCS. I think they run 200 hospitals, something like that. And that's just one of the events. So ransomware is deeply out there. As you can probably see by the sectors, you can probably pick your sector and we'll look as to what percentage. Schools, by the way, are highly impacted, usually during the July, August, September months, and they're part of the public sector there. We had an organization, just to give an example, that we partner with to some degree. They've got 80 offices around the world, and they were impacted by Ryuk, which is a really dangerous type of malware. Early on, they had some software called TrickBot that helped push it out to all the servers and workstations. And one of the interesting stats that I'm just kind of throwing in there is Ryuk is so bad that as a ransomware encryption key, that only 3 to 5% of the time do they even try to decrypt it. And one of the reasons why is because 12% of the files, when you decrypt them, even if you have the key and you've purchased and spent $1 million, if you will, to get the key, 1 out of every 8 files is not recoverable. Okay, just due to the encryption. That's how strong of an encryption mechanism they have on some of these files. So just throwing in some stats and some stories to kind of keep this fresh. So ransomware is not the beginning of the event. Usually it's the very end, as I like to say. The event occurred usually several months prior to you getting impacted by ransomware. You can bet all of the data not all of the data. You can bet that the hacktivists evaluated your network and determined what data they may want to grab or that they had access to, and they exfiltrated it. You can bet that they had been in there for several months, that they moved around accounts and had a pretty deep understanding of your network and had done a reconnaissance mission. You can bet that that not only is your data exfiltrated, but by the time you're getting that you're seeing ransomware on your servers, that there will be a website with your data and at least snippets of your data that's up there, and the ransomware demand to you will say that will tell you, hey, we're planning on leaking all of your data unless you pay us this money first. So the ransomware is one side effect, if you will, but really keep in mind your data is gone. And so while the choices aren't fun, you have choices that seem to either pay with a promise that stolen data is going to come back to you, and you'll have your encryption key, and the stolen data that's out on this website will be returned to you or destroyed with a certificate of destruction. Or you could risk this data exposure, which might trigger data breach notification requirements and customer loss and some other nastiness. So either way, not great choices, but that's kind of just giving you some background on that. So I guess to drill in on that specifically, you're now left with a situation where you're going to have to make some hard choices. And so let's walk through this. We had an organization that in January had this type of exposure. It was a Saturday call into our support desk. IT was seeing some services that were stopping. People were claiming that from their phones or their workstations, they were unable to log into Citrix, quote unquote, or email from our phones or PCs. Okay. That's all they know. Just can't log in, and things seem a little squirrely. And IT is looking, and they're like, wow, these services are down, and so forth. What happens within the next 24 hours, and this is now Sunday, usually you're working on this on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, because in almost all cases we've seen, it occurs on a Friday afternoon, Saturday, Sunday, weekends when there's long extended holidays. They had to deal with a $150K ransom note that came with this. They were told that their data had been exfiltrated. They had 2 weeks to come up with the money. And after 2 weeks, the ransomware would move to $300,000. There was evidence, obviously, that the data had been stolen. And so here's, right now, as you can imagine, trying to picture yourself in this, in their shoes, you have to make a determination of, what data you have, right? Who's going to be impacted by the loss of this data or the exposure of this data? Wait, do they have my customer database and everybody that, email addresses and account numbers, and do they have my secret sauce recipes? Do they have, so you're thinking of that. You're also thinking of, wow, what's the cost of my recovery for this, and what's going to be my loss of business? And you're trying to do some forecasting and weighing that against this $150,000 ransom, and jumbling some numbers all around. And keep in mind that's one box. All the while, you're also dealing with the here and now. Okay, how do we communicate? Our email system's down. Okay, do we use what's the email address for my CEO? Does he have a personal email? Are we going to go to a separate service? I think I have cell phones. Our phones are down now too. How long can we exist like this? Are we open for business? Are we serving customers still? Or are we stating on our website that we're shutting things down? I wonder how they got in. I wonder if they're still in. What's this going to cost us? So all of these things are kind of going on. That's kind of a separate box. And then meanwhile, you're also kind of in the third box. Day one, you're assembling a team, right? You've got lawyers that need to get in touch with. You got your insurance provider you need to get in touch with. Hopefully they have access to forensics. You've got a recovery team where you might be contacting, Peters and Associates as an example for that. You've got your customers, regulators, stakeholders, and so forth. So there's a fair amount to be doing. A couple in the days ensuing, what data was exposed, what systems are impacted, can you recover, things of that nature. So I left that graphic on there. There's a fair amount of data that you have, but certainly if you haven't done an inventory of your data and how significant that might be, that might be a good starting point too. So As I look at the time factor with 5 minutes left, I'm going to kind of move pretty quickly through the rest, but there's a fair amount here. Again, I'd reference the article to kind of talk through more of these points, but in terms of how they get in, as mentioned, there's software like TrickBot that can really just be, it's got a number of tentacles to it. It looks for VNC connections, RDP, it looks for it basically just, they put it on your network, not to infect your network, but to go find out how further can I exploit this network. And that TrickBot can be used to deliver, can be used later to deliver the actual malware payload. I was going to draw a diagram here and talk about some of the entry points, but in general, I'll use the slide here to say, let's remember what I've been mentioning long before, is that your authentication perimeter, and specifically your Azure Active Directory as an example, or Active Directory, is a point of great exposure in that, and Microsoft themselves says, hey, half of 1% of the accounts are compromised each month. And why are they compromised? Well, because people are coming up with really easy to guess passwords, and so when I do a spray, I can see them. Or guess them, or people are reusing their passwords. So when Facebook or other databases have breaches, those same passwords are reusable against their Office 365 for some period of time. And last but not least, a phishing exercise. So typical organizations can see breaches at this level because of these three ways by which identities are come along. So, there's this whole long kill chain that we could educate you about, and certainly, you can look over these slides as a post-event. My goal is not to review a kill chain with you nearly as much as to say, when you get, a message like this on your screen, you know that you've had a problem, and just remember that the data has been exfiltrated. This was just the day that they picked to cause the ransomware event, but there had been a lot of stuff prior to this. So the group, the quote was, the group behind Ryuk often spends months mapping the networks, high-value targets, lateral movement, and through manual hacking techniques. Their goal is to gain full admin control and deploy the ransomware on as many computers as possible in one go-to event for maximum impact. So that's real stories from the crypt. Protection, you have seen us chat liberally about the NIST cybersecurity framework, and I only put this up there for you to remember that protecting against every event that's going to potentially occur is a dangerous proposition. We certainly have a number of things that we look at to do, whether, and there's a good list for you to be doing. Air-gapped backups are a big portion of it, whether you look at it that way or in a grid format, like, hey, how mature do I want to be relative to ransomware risk? We certainly can help you evaluate that. Backups are, I would say, of key importance. We had a Veeam and Exagrid webinar last month that hopefully you were able to attend, but the idea of having an air-gapped backup and something, because this is the first area where they're attacking. We've actually seen in the last 2 months, they're now attacking VMware and Hyper-V hosts just to get the host, because it's an easy fix so that all the guests that are on that are obviously all impacted also. But SAN and NAS devices, wherever they get the biggest bang for the buck, and backups are your ability to recover, and so they want to go after that first. So an air-gapped backup is certainly worthy to evaluate. And whether you do a backup and recovery assessment with us to look at how you're doing things today, that's certainly something that we have capability to help you with. Or you could just offload the service to us, and we'll make sure that things are air-gapped and verify that backups are running. But those are ways in which we've helped customers before. Again, all that prevention aside, response and recovery, I normally would tell the story if I had a ton of time here about this organization that had to pay millions twice in Bitcoin because they never ended up spending any time looking at root cause or what the mechanism was for infiltration. I would remind you that because of an OFAC ruling, it really is quote unquote illegal most times to pay a ransomware. So certainly this is not something you want to venture into without legal and insurance advice. I would remind you that some of that team planning, whether it be the insurance, legal, what is your response, all of that should be pre-thought out and written down into an incident response plan. And that's something that we certainly have some assistance on, and there's a blog there that can maybe help you as you kind of gather some evidence about, hey, what's our incident response plan, and specifically around ransomware. We certainly have some trials of some software to kind of help you out in that space from a protection side too. And again, our blogs, our events are all key aspects of kind of how we're trying to be thought leaders in this space and trying to help the SMB organization not be as impacted as we've seen them be with regards to ransomware. So check out our guide, chat with us. Let's make sure that you're in a good position relative to ransomware. So with that, Samantha, I think I can call it a wrap. If there's any questions, I will take them.